Hi Art 3. So now that you've been exposed to different pen and ink techniques through the various exercises that I've assigned you to using the dip pens and also the microns and then the brush and ink, now it's time to think about your project and your vision for your piece and how that will translate into the pen and ink techniques that you can use for this project. So the cool thing is you have choices. You can create a range of value either through grayscale or color, using washes of ink with brush, and you can use washes of color also with a brush, and then create line with ink straight out of the bottle and a brush, and highlights with the white gouache and a brush. Or you can choose to use textures with the ink like you did with the micron or the crow-quill pen. You can use traditional textures like stippling, hatching, cross-hatching, scumbling. Or you can create your own textures with those pen and ink implements, the micron and the crow-quill pen. So I have just a slideshow that I wanted to take you through I can just kind of point out some different examples that are done in pen and ink and talk about the use of a light source, the application of different techniques to help you kind of visualize and plan your piece before we meet together in class and you trace your rough draft and then start working on your final copy. Okay, so by now you probably have some sort of a preference between either using like the microns in the crow-quill pen or the microns over the crow-quill pen versus the brush and ink. And so here are just some examples of different types of textures and subjects with each of those approaches. So on the left here, we have a bunch of different kind of textures done with just, just like a micron. And so you can start to think about, well, what kind of textures are in my piece? How would I go about using a micron with them? You can also use micron, or you could use the crow-quill pen too, to create textures and then brush some areas in with ink too, like in this pine cone piece. So you could do a combination of textures with the micron and then also brush areas in as well. And so it's really about thinking about the subject and then how you're going to translate it into black and white with texture. If you're not a fan of doing all those little tedious textures and you really like using the brush and the ink, you can think about whether you want to use like a gray wash with the black outline, and then you can also paint highlights in with the gouache, or if you want to use color. And so with the color, there's two choices there too. So you can choose to use the watercolor set that I have given you, or you can choose to use colored inks. They're just not very easy to transport home, unfortunately, but it's something that you could consider doing, all the rest of the steps at home and saving the color application for in class. The difference between watercolor and colored ink is watercolor can be lifted, whereas the colored ink, once it's down, you won't be able to re-wet it and lift it up. So it's more permanent. Okay, so once you kind of think about which approach you're maybe more drawn to or a combination between the approaches, I want you to start to think about the subject matter that is in your piece and how you might render it using these techniques. And so you're required to either have like a full range of color value or grayscale value, or the values need to be created using textures. And so when we use texture to create value, areas where there's more white between your textures are lighter, and then areas where the textures are closer together is how you make a darker value. When you're using textures, you have to think about how those textures will wrap around the form. And if you're going to use traditional textures like hatching and cross-hatching, how the direction of those strokes can be applied to develop form, to make something look three-dimensional. You can also think about using them in a way that you're changing the direction of the line. The micron is going to lend itself more to that than the crow-quill pen. The crow-quill pen, it's very hard to do, wavy, curvy lines with that without kind of having like ink spots happen. Not that it can't be done, but that is something to be mindful of. And so this is just kind of a slide of some different approaches. We've got, more traditional applications of pen and ink here. We have kind of some kind of bridge between the more traditional and kind of more expressive application of them. We have a color piece here as well. And then we also have this piece that has, a very dark feel to it too. And so you want to make sure that you're creating a scene. You've been working really hard on this, creating the scene in class. You've been thinking about what you can use in the composition, the arrangement of your subject matter to reinforce the meaning, which is really, really great. Here are some pieces by an illustrator that really have, the scene is really, really has a lot of illusion of depth. There's really interesting vantage points and also like light and dark as well. So all things to think about. Okay. So we really want to think about, is there a way that we can use not just our composition, not just our subject matter, but also the lighting in a scene to really create a mood to help tell the story, to help illustrate what you're trying to say in the piece. Okay, and then color. Is color something you want to apply really subtly? If it's a very subtle application of color, you should make sure that you're still meeting a full range of value in your piece with pen and ink, or is color going to be more a part of the piece? And so these pieces tend to be more on like the watercolor end, but there is some really expressive ink line in them, some more than others. And so you can think about, well, how am I going to fulfill the requirement of having a full range of value and having, interesting application of pen and ink. Okay, and then these are just some other really cool illustrations, most of them with animals, lots of detailed, very, lots of imagination kind of put into these that you could check out too. So I would encourage you to check out some pen and ink illustrations on your own time, research some things. If there's a certain subject that you're putting in your piece, I would suggest that you consider looking up a pen and ink illustration of that subject matter just to see how someone else has done it. It's a really, really great idea to kind of see what's out there and think about how you are going to bring something really unique to the study of that subject in your piece. Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in our next class, and reach out with any questions that you have. I'm just really looking forward to working on your projects with you. I think it's going to be really great. Cool. All right, bye.